Welcome to Legal Beagle.
All right, welcome back to Legal Beagle. We have a special guest with us today. His name is Ramon Baca, and he is the director of the Veteran Services right here in Livingston County. And I am your host from Legal Beagle, and I'm also the proud owner of Like Law PLLC. And with that being said, let's get with it today. And Ramon, you are the director of the Livingston County Veteran Services, correct?
That is correct.
So, Ramon, can you tell us, as director of the Veteran Services, tell us what the job description is there?
Under the direction of the Veteran Services Committee, I manage the overall operations of the department, coordinate local veterans programs, and oversee counseling services for veterans in the county. I develop the annual budget based on identified veteran needs and work with a committee to evaluate and implement new programs if needed, then in which we administer and my staff supports. I monitor changes in veterans laws, regulations, or court decisions, and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs procedures in which we implement any necessities with our operations. I also assist federal and state legislators as well as partner organizations in the development of related laws and regulations. Last but not least, I support local veteran organizations such as American Legions and VFWs in organizing their community events and providing public outreach on veterans issues.
Wow, that's quite a bit. Are you a veteran yourself?
I am. I served active duty in the Army for 25 years. I was an airborne ranger and served in the 82nd Airborne Division, 101st Airborne Division, and 4th Infantry Division.
Thank you for your service.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Part of those services that you referenced about were about disability. Can you explain how a veteran receives disability?
Sure. So to qualify as a service-connected disability, a veteran must show a current diagnosis, an event, an injury, or illness that occurred during the service, a nexus linking the condition to the service. To file a veteran service or to file for the claim, the veteran submits a disability claim with us and we submit it to the VA. The VA then reviews the veteran service treatment records or any private or VA medical records they might have submitted along with it. They can also include any statements on their own behalf or buddy statements to corroborate the story. Some cases require what's called a nexus letter. So what that is a doctor's medical opinion, which links the condition to their service. Most veterans then at that point are scheduled for compensation and pension exams, or commonly known as CNP, which are performed by VA contracted providers who evaluate the severity of the condition and then sends the findings to the VA rater, which helps determine the disability rating. So then what happens is the VA assigns a disability rating anything from 0% to 100% in increments of 10% at a time. So based on severity using the Code of Federal Regulations. So what happens is like a 0%, what that means, it's service connected, but it doesn't qualify for a monthly compensation. However, it does qualify for healthcare and any medications that might come along with that. 10% to 100%, what that means, it's a monthly tax-free compensation. And obviously, the higher the rating, the more pay they might get.
So could you give us like an example of that?
Yeah, sure. Like, for example, let's say somebody comes in for a hearing loss, and let's say, and it could be any MOS, which is your military occupational specialty. But let's take an easy example. Let's say the service member was an infantryman or an artilleryman, or maybe they worked on aircraft, so around loud aircraft. So what happens is they come in with now years later their hearing loss. Well, it's easy for the VA to see their MOS, and they at that point will look at their service treatment records and see what their exit physical might have said, and they could tend to see any declination in hearing at that point. And then with the CNP exam, then they basically tell the provider will tell the VA what the severity is now, and then which then they can award them the compensation according to that scale. So kind of putting it all together, person comes in with hearing, they claim it. It comes to find out that yes, the military caused it. It was the onset of it. And then the VA determines that it's an appropriate approval and they award them.
So the next question I have for you today is, how often do you observe veterans eligible for disability that have, maybe have not received their benefits as of yet?
Sure. No, that's common. So sometimes like predominantly at outreach events, or if we're say at an American Legion or a VFW, many times they're already connected, but Probably a best example is an outreach event. We meet veterans who mention that they either A, have never applied, or if they have, it was years ago and they never really followed through with it. So as we continue the conversation, we learn more about their service history and the challenges that they're experiencing. Then we often identify potential service connected disabilities. So with that understanding, we're able to encourage them to reconnect the process and then explore the benefits that they may now be eligible for.
So, how long does it take for a veteran to receive disability? Do they get a monthly check per se, or do they get a yearly check? How does that work?
Yeah, so the process typically takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months, depending on the severity, or really, I should say, the complexity of the issues. Usually, if there's like one contention, it's fairly quick. Earlier, I talked about a hearing contention; those are fairly quick. They're fairly easy. But if there's something a little more complex, it could take longer. And what takes the length of time is if there's multiple contentions, they have to get sent to multiple C&P exams, but once those issues are rated, then they begin receiving, most importantly, the health care, and then second to that, the compensation.
And when you say multiple contentions, do you mean multiple disabilities, like, for instance, hearing loss and maybe something wrong with their left arm and their right arm? Is that what you mean by contentions?
Exactly. So let's say, hearing and then left shoulder, they had physical therapy because they dislocated it during the training event, or in combat, something happened. And then, like, let's say another, it could be, back or hip or knee or anything like that. So, yeah, so multiple injuries or multiple, what we call contentions.
With that being said, we have heard about Agent Orange. Now, are there a lot of veterans receiving benefits to these types of situations?
Sure. As of late, there are quite a few. Matter of fact, there's over 20 illnesses that are considered presumptive conditions. So regarding Agent Orange, a presumptive condition, for an example, a common example is hypertension. So, it took years and decades for the VA to concede that they were getting a lot of these claims, and lo and behold, these individuals were around Agent Orange in Vietnam and in some multiple places associated with Vietnam. So, with that said, they called them presumptive conditions. So, in other words, they presume that you have that illness because you were there, because you were boots on ground in that particular area of operations. Now, let's say, for example, and they're not all the same, but let's say hypertension, for example, it's controlled with medication. Um, and so when it's controlled like that, oftentimes this particular illness will find that they'll rate them at a 0%. So with that said, they won't give them any monthly compensation, but they'll give them the free medication that comes along with that. Now, there's obviously, like I mentioned, there's over 20 illnesses on this list, and some of them do come with higher ratings. That's just one example of many.
And hypertension, you're talking about like high blood pressure, correct?
Correct. That's right.
And so if they won't get a benefit, but they do actually get a benefit because they get their medication free, correct?
Correct. So that is obviously a pretty good benefit regarding the healthcare. Um, and I can backtrack a little bit regarding the percentages. So let's say, as I mentioned, a 0% equates to that particular illness or injury, the free healthcare for that. But let's say there's multiple disabilities later. Let's just say, for the ease, there's 5 contentions, and then they rate up to 50% or higher. But let's say, so once you get 50%, now you're eligible for free VA healthcare for everything head to toe, to include medications, to include specialty clinics. It doesn't necessarily have to do anything with your service connections. So the key is, if you can get over 50% due to whether it's just one rated at 50 or multiple disabilities later, that allows you healthcare from head to toe. But if you're 40% or less, then you're going to get the healthcare specifically for that disability, or for the department that takes care of those disabilities.
So just so I have this right, if you're 40%, then you just get that disability that you have the 40% for. Like if it was hypertension, and just for an example, and then you get the medication for free, but there might be, but 50% is the mark that we want to get, right?
Correct. That would be the mark that you would want to get for head to toe healthcare. Let's say you had like audiology and optometry. So, you have hearing and eyes. So, and you had, whether it's a 10% or a 0% for either or, let's just take hearing at a 10%, and your vision at 10%. Well, now you get those clinics specifically for those injuries, you get those clinics free of charge.
Now I'm just curious, and maybe, and I'm sure you know this answer, but the back, like your back, now that's a larger portion of your body. We can all agree on that. But would that be a 40%er or a 50% maybe?
Well, again, it just varies. I mean, somebody might just simply get a 20% rating for lower back. Let's just so now, and let's say somewhere along the back, they've encountered another injury. Maybe it's not service connected necessarily. So if they were rated, say, lower back issues rated at a 20%, but now, somewhere along their spine, there's another injury that's crept up on them. Well, that same specialist can look at the back. So anything encompassing the back or that region, they'll get that healthcare for free because they're in that department, if you will.
It's fascinating because I never knew about that. I mean, I knew about the percentages, but it's nice to tell the public this because a lot of the individuals out there do not know like how the percentages do work, and there's a lot of calculations that go into that too as well. Correct?
That's correct. There's no cookie cutter way to explain that. It's all based on individual injuries and disabilities. And so, yeah, there's not one blanket answer for everybody. But however, again, the way the percentages work is, generally from 0 to 40, you get for those particular disabilities, 50% and above. Now you can get for head to toe, regardless if something wasn't necessarily connected in that equation.
So, what kind of services, Ramon, do you provide for families um, of veterans for funerals?
Yeah, so for families, for loved ones left behind, what we can offer is we have a county reimbursement of up to $1,000. As per state law, each county is authorized to provide out-of-pocket expenses up to $300. However, here in Livingston County, due to the passage of our millage funds, we're able to actually provide up to 1,000 of out-of-pocket reimbursement. Now, simultaneously, depending on the service connection of that particular veteran, the federal VA may also offer a reimbursement up to $2,000. So, take for example, um, loved ones left behind that might have encountered a $5,000 invoice for their burial needs. County, we can do up to 1,000, and the federal VA, if they're granted all of it, that's 2,000. So with that said, they were reimbursed a grand total of 3,000. Now, logically, if there was only a thousand of reimbursement to be had and they claim it through the county, well, then we're not going to file that through the VA, i.e. would be double dipping.
Understood. Now, you stated that our county in Livingston County, it provides $1,000. Is If you're not aware of this, that's fine. Just say I don't know. But are we? Is that part of the millage that was passed a while back?
Yes, correct. So we pay those out-of-pocket reimbursement expenses out of the millage. Anything that our operations are largely able to be done through millage. So everything from keeping the lights on to our barrel reimbursement to our emergency relief, to our renewal of annual certifications for our VSOs, which are the veteran service officers. It's all done out of millage.
So it's pretty nice to have those millages. Is that safe to say?
Absolutely. I left off probably quite a few things. Another one that comes direct to my mind is the transportation service that we've already spoken about earlier. So again, anything that we do out of this office and able to provide services for, it all is done through, through taxpayers and their overwhelmingly response to voting in the millage.
Now, are these just for Livingston County veterans only?
Yeah, so we can file VA claims, whether it's the disabilities, and I think in a little while we'll get into the survivors programs, but anything federally related, we're nationally accredited, so we can file for anyone nationwide. However, we do require them to come face to face for the initial visits so that they can logically drop off their documents and then, of course, sign any of the VA forms they need to sign. But all that said, the emergency relief program and the transportation programs, that is done strictly for Livingston County veterans. Now, all offices throughout the state will have an office, or I should say, all counties throughout the state will have an office like mine. So your specific county office can offer emergency relief.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. So, what about you stated earlier about survivor benefits? Because we're going to get into that a little bit here, but what about survivor benefits for wives and husbands? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So there's a couple of programs. So one is called the Dependency and Indemnity Compensation, or DIC for short. So what it is a tax-free monthly benefit paid by the Department of Veterans Affairs to a surviving spouse or even the eligible children of a veteran who died from a service-connected condition. Now, bear in mind, those children have to be, they're minors or up to 23 if still in college. So with that said, um, eligibility can be established if the service-connected disability is the principal or or contributing cause of death. So death certificates, fun fact, can be amended when necessary as well. DIC may be granted if the veteran was rated by the VA continuously at 100% for 5 years since the veteran's release from active duty, immediately preceding death, or if they were rated for a period of 10 years prior to death. Before I get into the next program, is there any questions on the DIC, Kristina?
I was just curious. You said fun fact about this amending. You can amend a death certificate, huh?
Right. So through the coroner's office, the person that's left behind that's stated on the death certificate can collaboratively work with the coroner's office to amend a certificate if needed. So, for example, if a primary cause of death is listed, but there's contributing factors, and they come to find out that some of those contributing factors, like let's say something having to do with coronary, maybe those contributing factors could be listed also as like a secondary on the death certificate. And so, with that said, if any of those contentions, whether it's the primary or principal or any of the contributing factors, if they're listed, then and they're also VA rated as service connections, that's how the VA can look at those and award DIC.
Nice. I understand that now. So then the wife or the husband then can get those benefits, then, right?
Correct. Because at first glance, if there's only one item listed as a principal, but there could have been multiple, and that one item wasn't a service connection, but there was contributing factors. As long as those contributing factors are listed as well, that's how the VA will look at that death certificate.
I was always wondering how that happened. So thank you for clearing that up.
Survivor's pension is a little more complicated. It's what it is. It's a needs-based, tax-free monetary benefit paid to the unremarried surviving spouse of a wartime veteran who has died. As long as survivors meet the certain income criteria and net worth limits. Okay. The deceased veteran for wartime had to serve. So if they served before September 7th of 1980, they must have served at least 90 days of active duty with at least 1 day during a wartime period as defined by the VA. And of course, did not receive a dishonorable discharge. Okay, so what wartime means is they don't necessarily have to be boots on ground. Going back to like the presumptive that we talked about, Agent Orange, well, they were boots on ground, they were there. But in this case, wartime, let's say the individual was stationed in Germany at the time, but they were in during wartime, Vietnam era in this example, then they could qualify for this benefit. Now, after September 7th of 1980, veteran must have served 24 months compared to the 90 days of active duty or fulfilled the period of which they were called to active duty for, with 1 day again during a period of war. Surviving spouses must have been married to the veteran at time of death and not remarried. Now, however, some exceptions can apply for remarriage after age 57. Children, if they're claiming this, who are under 18 or 18 to 23, if attending school, they must be unmarried. Or the other case is if they're permanently incapable of self support before age 18, and it's proven, they can collect then after the age of 18. Now, remember, I said there are financial requirements for this program. So the pension is needs based. So survivors must meet annual income limits and net worth limits. What happens is the VA combines the income and assets, except the primary home, vehicle, and basic personal items. The VA then goes on to calculate payment by subtracting your countable income from the maximum annual pension rate.
So Ramon, does that mean that they can actually have just one vehicle then
Correct. So they won't count that first vehicle against them, but if they had a second vehicle, then they would calculate what that's worth, and that would go against their income.
Okay. And then they can have their personal property
Of
through.
course, so normal personal property like clothing and furniture and whatnot.
I was just curious. Now you said earlier too, a minor, with a minor, they cannot be married. Is that what you stated?
That's correct. So if they're already married, say that, let's say they were a college student, as we established, if they're between 18 and 23 in college, they could still qualify. But let's say, they were a young freshman in college, 19 or 20 years old, but they're married, then they won't qualify for this program.
So if someone was trying to reach out to get help from like transportation, how would they do so?
Yeah, so all they would have to do is one of two things. They just contact our office. We just want to be able to put a DD 214 on file. So they would either drop it off or email it or send it to us, or even upon the first pickup, we can get a scanned copy of that. But to normally schedule, they'll just call Let's, which is a sister department in our county. And what Let's does for us is they run all the dispatching software. So they contact Let's, they just tell them that they're a veteran, or they're a spouse or a widow of a veteran, and that qualifies them. Let's will then turn around and just ask us if we have their DD 214 on file. And then if we do and they have the honorable discharge, then we'll go and allow them to continuously book reserve rides. And so that's all they have to do is call Let's, book a ride. We ask them to do no more than 30 days out. But once the 30-day is away from your appointment, go ahead and call in because it's first come first serve. So as the rides get reserved and we don't have any more capacity, then you might be denied a ride simply because we don't have capacity. So the sooner you know, then the better.
So 30 days is the max, though, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, realizing you have appointments sometimes 6 months out, but once you're down to the 30-day mark, that's the appropriate time to go ahead and call and lock in your ride.
And those rides, so everybody knows, those are for like the VA, correct?
So we definitely take them to the VA, but it doesn't have to be VA specific. So we've opened up our routes to up to a 50-mile radius within our office, and it could be anything medical. It could be anything dental. It could be any chiropractor, physical therapy, and it doesn't have to be specifically related to a VA appointment. So long as it's medical, we'll get you from door to door. So meaning pick you up at your home, take you all the way to your appointment, wait on you there, and then bring you back home again. Now, if it's like dialysis, for example, we have a few folks that do that, and it's like a 4 hour long appointment. We'll drop them. We'll go pick up some other folks, take them where they have to go. And then, once that 4 hours is up, either the same driver or a different driver will pick that individual up and take them home again.
That is a wonderful service that you guys provide. So, what about Ramon about taking individuals to go get their medication?
Yeah, sure. It's having to do with your medical appointment. So if you need the medications or the prescriptions, we can take you, if you need to ride to Walgreens, for example, to get that, that's fine. Anything medically or anything related to medical.
And then you stated like for the dialysis, they actually will come back and come pick them up, correct? After a while.
Correct. Absolutely. So, once you call into Let's, now bear in mind, Let's dispatches for us, then they dispatch our drivers employed by Veteran Services. Our guys will go back and pick you up and then take you back home again.
Okay. And just for everybody all our listeners out there, some people are disabled that need wheelchairs. Now these Let's buses, they have their wheelchair accessible then, correct?
Yeah, so my department, we have three vehicles. We have two minivans, one transit van, which is, a bigger vehicle, almost like a little bus. But yes, they're all equipped with lifts and wheelchair capabilities. So we can, in our bigger transit van, we can actually put two wheelchairs in there at one time. Our minivans, we can put one.
Just so that people are aware of this, how can they get a hold of you if they need to get a service like what you've already talked about today and discussed with us? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so our phone number is 517-546-6338. Our address is 1420 Lawson Drive. It's right off of Grand River. We're right next to the Secretary of State in Howell. We're in the same plaza as Secretary of State. So again, I can repeat the phone number, 517-546-6338. And again, our location, the easiest way to find us is next to Secretary of State in Howell and also right next to the Kohl's department store.
So Ramon, I don't know if you're aware that our office does a lot of things for our veterans, so we're really appreciative of the services that you provide. Um, if ever you hear of somebody that is in need of legal services, we do offer some of their pro bono services to veterans. We want to give back to them because, they gave back to us when they gave to us our constitutional rights. So we try to fight for them too as well. So we are very appreciative of you. And I hear that you're there quite a bit and you work just so hard for our community people and our veterans. So you have a lot of appreciation throughout the county. I don't know if you're aware of that, but I'm sure you are.
Well, I'm not sure if I was aware of that, but I do appreciate that. We do work hard. My staff works extremely hard, and they're some of the most wonderful individuals, so kind-hearted and go above and beyond to ensure that veterans and their families all get everything that they're deserving of. Because as you already alluded to, the veterans is why we have what we have. So I appreciate you, Christine, and the services you offer for our veterans too. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming on our show today. And with that being said, this is today's episode of Legal Beagle, and we really thank Ramon for coming and taking time today. I know that you have a busy schedule, a couple of meetings later on tonight, so I really appreciate your time. With that being said, that ends our episode today. Make sure you like us and share this episode with others. Many veterans need your help and also could use these services. Thank you again, and have a great time. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.